Hello and welcome everybody to EMEA's last chance qualifier for the World Championship tournament. I'm joined today by Caster Gems. My name is freshlobster. We are super excited to bring you the action after the APAC tournament has just concluded. And we saw a lot of creativity there, a lot of variety of decks making it very far. And the tournament winning lineup by NTNN3 consisted of a Poro King deck as well as Teemo Puffcap. Some serious craziness going on there. And Gems, are you expecting some similar creativity from our EMEA players today?
I sure hope so. It was a fantastic showing from APAC, just showing us the possibilities of what a last chance qualifier can do. People from all rank distributions showing up here and doing fantastically and showing that it's not over until you try for your last attempt. And moving on for today, we're going to have a look at what the format for the tournament is going to be. There are 64 players as usual. We are using what is known canonically as Riot Lock, where they can bring 3 different decks with no duplicated champions and region combinations. They take turns to ban one of the opponent's decks, and then they can't use it once they win with it. And there is a time limit on the matches, and everything is obviously a best of 3. Hopefully, we'll see it's single elimination, and we'll find out who's going to be the winner.
And moving on to the prize pool segment, it's a bit special today because there's no direct cash prizing in this tournament. And also there are no Runeterra points to be accumulated anymore. It doesn't matter because most of the World Championship slots are already given away. What the people do compete here for is first and second both get a direct invitation to the World Championship. And that implies they make at least $1,000 in prize money and they have a shot up to the first place prize of $30,000 US. So still a lot on the line on this tournament, but it is highly unusual because it's go big or go home. You either make it to the grand finals or you go home empty-handedly, and that must put some special pressure onto these players.
Yeah, for nearly all of them, I believe, that have qualified here for the top 64, they have to make it to the top 2. I think there's maybe one exception throughout all of it that has a shot with points, potentially when the points cutoff does happen for ladder in a day or 2 time. But everyone else has to make it to that top spot, or that's it. That's their world streams gone for this year.
And we are ready to jump into the bracket to see our qualified players and the matchup for today. And we see sitting at the very top of the bracket here, Ricorex versus Major Blazer, our first featured match of the stream. Of course, Ricorex being a fan favorite, the overwhelm god himself. This should be a very exciting one, and I'm super curious to see what kind of overwhelm spice Ricorex is bringing this time around.
Yeah, super happy to see some UK representation there with Arachnid and Marshall, and also one of my scrim partners, JNSB, also qualifying here for the top 64. Really, this bracket, it's sad for me to see because everyone I want is on this quarter, so they're going to inevitably knock each other out.
That seems to be the curse of these brackets. I am noticing, going with a bit of bias towards looking at German competitors here, it's kind of underrepresented this time around. I just say most of the German quality grinders have already qualified, but still a bunch of interesting names. What I'm surprised by is there are also a lot of, to me at least, unknown names in this part of the bracket, which means that these open qualifiers did fulfill their job and kind of give everyone a chance and a wild card to still make it into the World Championship on the very last chance, on the very last second.
Yeah, I mean, that's the beauty of a last chance qualifier that's open to everyone, right? You're going to have things like this pop up. It's an open field with tons of players being there, and it's going to be just surprising to see who makes it all the way to the finals. For all we know, it could be a player we haven't seen show themselves throughout the entire year. I think we saw in APAC, I believe Pimping Ho came out of sort of semi-retirement and went all the way to the semifinals.
Yeah, we did see some legendary stories, some Cinderella storylines almost, of people who still made it into the World Championship. And I do think the APAC tournament earlier was a perfect example of this. The winner of that tournament, NTNN3, actually still was in silver rank in this Legends of Runeterra ranked ladder season, but did impress with a quality lineup and some quality plays, and therefore deservingly still got a shot at glory at the World Championship. Look, going back to this bracket, there's one more matchup that I find interesting. That is Sonic Holic versus Okabe Ace. Two names that pop up in the ranked ladder quite consistently, and especially with Sonic Holic, very consistent tournament grinder and top cutter.
Yeah, they've been around for a long period of time as well in the game, have been consistently doing well, and hopefully we get to see some of their matches later on. But as it is with the nature of these big tournaments, sometimes we don't end up catching them and seeing what they've brought, and we're just going to have to hope they go and win as many matches as possible, basically.
Yep. And moving on to the bracket, we do see, okay, here's a couple of German familiar names in Timmy and Draislin. A couple of great matchups as well in, for example, Vendorti and Shampoo. Shampoo is one of the most consistent ladder finishers in EMEA, probably worldwide. Pretty much always ranking top 5 at the end of the season. Just next to Teddy most of the time. And then Doherty also someone who I actually played way back in the open beta of Legends of Runeterra in tournaments already, and therefore just bringing a ton of tournament experience to the table.
Yeah, and the Italians are also in full force here with Broken Ball, Papat General, and Sir Snashtik. Fantastic showing from them as well this season. Normally we say it's the Germans, but the Italians are coming in full force this time.
Moving on to the next segment of the bracket, we have a bit more French representation here with Sequoia, another ladder and tournament beast, going up against Legacy of Yone, one of my favorite usernames in Legends of Runeterra, also a consistent ladder and tournament player. Apart from there, I would say there are a lot more wildcards in this part of the bracket than usual. A lot of names I don't recognize, but we'll see if one of them can prevail or if the tried and tested and experienced tournament grinders can battle their way through.
Yeah, just on that note, Bodystar, one of the player names there, as mentioned, was messaging me yesterday, and they're like, I don't normally play the opens, but I wanted to for the cosmetics, and I accidentally top cut for day 2. Yeah. So this just shows you how open it is, right?
Yeah, another perfect example of how everyone can go for the long shot, can go for the dream scenario, and kind of make it to the World Championship out of nowhere. And that is ultimately what this whole year of Legends of Runeterra was shaping up towards, because this is the prestige, the premier tournament, by far the biggest prize pool. And this is the main reason why everyone competed in these tournaments in the first place, was to qualify for that World Championship.
Yeah, it's all to play for here, and our first match of the day is going to be Major Blazer up against Ricorex, and we see the Zed Gwen coming out here from Major Blazer. So Gwen Zed is one of the sort of I wouldn't want to say it's an aggro deck, but it's very more on the aggressive front. It's a deck that likes to high roll with playing the hallowed units, getting Gwen down, trying to finish the game off a lot sooner than a lot of other decks, and just utilizing the ephemerals that keep coming back to life from the Opulent Foyer, from Shark Chariots, and stuff like the Dragon's Ambush.
Yeah, and a very streamlined deck list. I'm not seeing any spicy tech choices there. The next deck screams spice. A Teemo K list. This is something I have personally not seen in action yet. It is going to try to go wide in the early game with all of Vandal City's Swarm support, even packing in some unusual cards like Yordle Explorer and Paparo the Great. And as a top-end finisher, Jolani is going to try to transform all of those small Yordles into something like 18 Overwhelm units and go for a complete Overwhelm Overkill finish.
Yeah, and the final deck here is the staple pick for, I think, a lot of players today. It will be the Jax Ornn, a very strong mid-range style deck. It's got Ornn as the finisher, but it's got tons of tools, and this is a very spell-heavy version of it, running one copy of Sharesies. I've seen it's running Bellows Breath as well, which a lot of decks have cut, so that's interesting to see here from Major Blazer.
Jax Ornn is the deck we probably will see a lot of indeed. It always comes back for these top cuts, and right away we see it on the other side as well. Ricorex going with a triple Battle Fury, triple Bone Club Bonk version. Only playing one Ornn, that's something that's very peculiar to me. Sacrificing some of that top end for more tempo and priority, trying to close out the game early round, playing a lot more 3-offs of those super dangerous cards like Sharesies, like Wildclaw's Ferocity, and like Battle Fury, which can just impact the game so much at burst or focus speed.
Yeah, and this is the Riven Darius list that he brought yesterday for the Swiss portion of the day. And he was messaging us in chat as well, and he's like, okay, I didn't really test this list, and he just played it. But knowing Rico, it's got Battle Furies. He's going to do well with it, and he's shown that he's able to do well with it either way. So still managed to get that clean 9-0 sweep with this deck, and thought, well, it's good. It was good enough for yesterday. I'm going to bring it again today.
There is one thing I am wildly surprised by, and that is to only see 2 copies of Battle Fury in that deck. I don't know what happened to Ricorex. He doesn't seem like the kind of person to only bring 8 Battle Furies to the Last Chance Qualifier top card. But things do return to norm here with the triple Battle Fury Bard, Gnar, Sejuani deck. This is definitely a bit of a wild one. One of Bard is not something we often see. This does allow for all of the Freljord Overwhelm to kick in, and the key card here, I think, is Revna, the Lore Keeper, trying to buff her through, for example, these Chimes, and then going crazy on deck buffs and overwhelms. And we are about ready to hop into the action here. Ricorex versus Major Blazer, game 1.
Yeah, and we are in turn 4 here, and it is the Gwen Zed left up by being played by Major Blazer, and I'm not sure which Overwhelm deck. Oh, it's the Jax On version with the weapons. So, okay, this is looking very interesting. The hate spikes come down here for Major Blazer, looking to try and remove the combat cook here.
And Ricorex only has the Xerxes option. As we do see in the graphics, the bans are coming in. The Timo Jolani deck was getting banned. We're not going to see Timo Jolani action. That is sad because it looked like the most offbeat and unusual deck here. But Ricorex just identifying their lineup's weaknesses correctly, going for that ban. And jumping into the action, Major Blazer currently using that hate spike, trying to protect the Zed, and going for a Shadow Shift to keep that Prodigy alive to generate more hallowed units a bit later on down the line.
Yeah, not only does it keep the unit alive, it removes the 3-1 with tough from Ricorex's side. So that basically stops Rico. So yeah, the one thing you have to know when you're playing these against these Overwhelm style decks, you are very much beholden to how many Overwhelm units they have on the board and how heavy they can swing at you with. So having those removed means that stuff like the Bone Clubs, the Battle Furies lose a lot of their effectiveness. So it's fantastic to remove those as soon as you can.
But speaking of Overwhelm units, Ricorex can generate 2 with the Wild Claw's Ferocity. Although no direct Overwhelm units in hand, Ricorex does have access to Overwhelm. So far, Major Blazer making, like, for a very aggressive deck, Zed Gwen has premier removal options because it forces the opponent to block awkwardly a lot of the time, and Major Blazer's deck can add combo tricks like Hate Spike, like Shadow Shift, like Mark of the Isles on top to really go for some favorable trades, and that's what we're seeing in full effect here. Ricorex board has shrunk quite a bit, and Major Blazer currently is on the gas pedal in this game.
Yeah, however, Major Ricorex does have the opportunity of having like the big blowout turns potentially, so and there's no real ways of stopping that in a Gwen Zed. So as long as they can get an extra turn where they can survive, Ricorex can look to try and set it up on the following turn with like the Wild Claw's Ferocity, potentially playing 1 this turn with then the Battle Fury next turn. But in this case, going just for the most likely what will be the Jax level up. But as we can see, we'll be forced to use the Elixir Orion here.
Speaking of level ups though, Major Blazer just going for a straight up cheater move and putting Elusive on the Zed as if he wasn't already tough enough to deal with. Usually the Omen Hawk would be a good option here to block the Zed and still go for a favorable trade. Major Blazer deciding though whether or not to pull the Omen Hawk with this Zapling or to pull the Jax to slow down Ricorex's game plan further and to prevent that Jax from leveling on the next attack. So Ricorex now left with the option to potentially block that Zed with the Omen Hawk, the hero of the day.
Yeah, I think you potentially go for it because if they use Hate Spike on Zed, I mean not Hate Spike, if they use like a Mark of the Isles on Zed, you're not going to be too upset because Zed still dies. You get to remove it. The only downside Rico has here is what we see him contemplating is that he needs a unit alive. At least one for the Wild Claw's Ferocity or for the Battle Fury to have any effect.
That is a great point. The thing is, even on, like, Ricorex's next attack is not going to look scary enough. The Wild Claw does not push enough damage, and that means Major Blazer probably can expect to attack 1 more time later down the line. Tries to keep the Jax alive, to keep the win condition alive, to have more Overwhelm units on board, and that's where the Mark of the Isles comes through, and that's where the Zed level up also comes through, while Jax is still died. This is looking very good for Major Blazer here.
Yeah, that's very much a scenario where I think us as casters have the past division moment, right? So we know there's a Mark of the Isles. Ricorex probably went, okay, look, I can't really play around Mark of the Isles. My win con next turn is to get maybe Wild Claw's Ferocity or Battle Fury and then attack and get enough damage to try and push for lethal. And took the risk and obviously got punished a little bit there for it. And on this turn, I mean, if you're Major Blazer, you can probably just take 12 here.
Yeah, if I recall correctly, there's no way of dealing direct damage to the Nexus in Ricorex's deck. Ricorex going for a bit of a psychological scare here, just jamming the Battle Fury on, threatening to put Major Blazer down to 1 HP, and that's exactly what happens. But Major Blazer is going to be like, okay, you cannot stop my hand next turn. You probably can't even stop the Dragon Ambush this turn. Well, I guess the Omen Hawk does have a block. Ricorex is sitting at 5 HP right now. But the onslaught of the stage hands next turn is probably going to be unstoppable. Major Blazer elects to go for the open attack here, resummoning the Zed Shadow and the Hallowed unit, and that is all she wrote for game 1. Zed Gwen going for an explosive start and an explosive finish and taking the victory here.
Yeah, it's one of those decks that is explosive, as you said, but also has, as we've seen countless times throughout the last couple of weeks when players have been testing it and playing, a lot of the bigger issues for bringing this deck that people have faced is that sometimes it can just lose to itself. Which is a bit unfortunate, but again, if you feel comfortable in it, if you feel like you got the heart of the cards, so to speak, it's one of those decks that will, for the most part, destroy the open field should you get a decent start with it.
And that's exactly what we saw from Major Blazer. Now it looks like we're going to see the mirror match. I'm not quite sure if it's a mirror or if Ricorex is playing the Bard version of the Overwhelm deck. We will see that in a second. So far, all Freljord cards. And it is the mirror match. Interestingly enough, I would say Ricorex is probably slightly favored here because of the 3 of Battle Fury, 3 of Sherzies, and so on. All of the combat tricks are very useful. The only thing that is a bit scary is only having 1 Ornn in that mirror.
Yeah, there's a few other cards that Rico will have to potentially play around, such as the Harsh Winds could potentially be a big blowout in a turn. So obviously it is a one-off, so most likely Rico will not play around it, depending on the situation. But it is one of those cards where if you don't respect it in such a board-centric match like this, it could just end your tournament right there and then.
And both players have decent openings, but Major Blazer, I would say, is very close to the nuts with the Omen Hawk, with the Apprentice, and then buffing up the Scout weapon. That is so nasty to deal with. And if Major Blazer should get an Ornn online on turn 7, this is going to be devastating. Sherzies here coming in super effectively as well, bashing the Nexus for a lot of damage while... well, the second attack is not available anymore. The Omen Hawk so far holding steady. Probably going to see a buffed Combat Cook come down here. Has to be a fix and pick because you will need that Combat Cook as a blocker later on. Still, well, pretty even state so far, but I prefer Major Blazer's hand and position right now.
Yeah, this is a matchup which is like the classic... I mean, neither deck are Demacia, but this is like a very similar to like Season 1 Demacia style matchup where it's very board centric, very combat trick focused, and trying to utilize and get favorable trades where and if possible for both players to try and eke out maybe a slightly wider board or a slightly taller board in the case of Rico.
Yeah, there is always that additional threat though of a sudden overwhelm lethal. And this is something where Ricorex, I would say, has better chances. Not just because he's currently the only player with an Overwhelm unit in hand, but also because he can make more use out of those Overwhelms because of more combat tricks and more Bone Clubs.
These entrancing lures right now for Major Blazer are a fantastic option here to start cleaning up this board and do what I was mentioning before, which is getting those very, very favorable trades across the board.
Ricorex keeping mana open, threatening a variety of combat tricks, but also having the option to develop another blocker. It's a bit of an awkward spot for Ricorex because you are aware that your opponent plays a bunch of entrancing lures as well as fish fights, so you don't really want to sacrifice a lot of units into that. Goes for the Apprentice as another blocker, probably gonna buff up the weapon of the second Combat Cook in a second. But we see more weapons come into play on Major Blazer's side here. And the Beethoven Castaway, actually a bit of an interesting decision. Does Major Blazer keep up the tempo, go for the Shepherd's Authority? And the answer is yes, just valuing the stat line a lot.
Oh, and with Rico tapping down here, basically sort of saying to Major Blazer that, look, okay, no combat tricks, no sky spillers for you to worry about. This enchanting lure is just going to be a free trade here with the quick attack on the combat cook.
Yeah, that is so nice for Major Blazer. That basically made it easy, took away the decision, the mental warfare of, do I play around that combat trick, do I not? It is just gonna be a unit picked up for free. Ricorex now top decking the Wild Claw's Ferocity, and that would make for a good attack. But is that really the move? Ricorex also having the option to either play Bone Club or develop some other units.
Yeah, this is looking very, very difficult for Rico. Has the tools to close out the game in hand right now, but we're in a sort of a weird state of limbo where neither player kind of wants to fully commit what they have, because doing that will potentially put them out of like the fish fight mana potentially, or like Battle Fury or Glacial Saurian into fish fight sort of thing are huge issues here for Rico.
Yeah, things are not looking too rosy as of right now. The good thing is that Major Blazer is about to run out of units. The bad thing is Jack's in hand is quite the powerful units and a variety of useful combat tricks. Even Fish Fight might come in handy very soon. Could be used right here to contest that beefy apprentice with the Bone Club. You would first have to commit a catch though for the +1/+1 buff. So let's see how Major Blazer navigates this. There are a lot of options.
Yeah, I'm not against using catch and fish fight here. You still have enough mana to potentially develop Jax and go for a nice open swing on the next turn, potentially with another entrancing lure. So it's a close call. This is kind of one of the issues the Jackthorn deck can occasionally fall into, where you end up with a lot of spells and weapons in hand, but no units or a lack of units. And for both players, that's starting to become an issue.
Mm-hmm. Does seem to be going for the fish fight. The awkward thing about fish fight is that if you go for the unequip a weapon option, then the combat cook is not a great blocker anymore on the board, and you don't really want to tank a lot of Nexus HP against a deck that has so many overwhelm threats. Does go for the fish fight nonetheless. I assume this attack is just going to be let go through. And that's exactly what we see here. Redevelopment coming in, the leveled Jax on Major Blazer's side.
Yeah, that's going to set up a pretty good opening attack for Major Blazers. However, it's not enough yet to actually close out the game. So it's going to be interesting to see where this goes. Rico's looking actually pretty okay now, purely because Major Blazer hasn't been able to draw into the key, more basic key units for closing out the match. All these spells, while fantastic, aren't going to allow Rico to really, Major Blazer to like really close out the game.
But on Rico's end, there's also a bit of an awkward thing going on, and that is that these Saurians are not going to draw an additional unit. They're not going to apply their conditional effect because there is no card of another faction, of another type on the board for Ricorex right now. No Weapon Master or Bird or anything else. And that's why Ricorex has been so patient with the Saurian so far, but at some point they are going to have to be played. Major Blazer here, picking up another combat cook, which is quite useful, but first of all having to decide how this attack is going to be played out.
Ooh, the Hellstones is huge for Blazer here, because depending on what Rico does here, you have the option just to flash freeze here and still be okay. If they had one more mana, actually, they could have gone for the Entomb, but unfortunately they don't have that.
The Entomb would have been huge. That would have actually been probably a blowout and game breaking, but Major Blazer just 1 mana short and now either needs to go for a flash freeze or a Fury of the North. Fury is not enough, the Jax would still die, so I'm expecting a flash freeze out of the Three Sisters here.
Yeah, again, if they had 1 more mana, they could have potentially gone for it with the catch.
One thing though, like Major Blazer might be on the read that Ricorex is holding Wild Claw's Ferocity, and that means you actually need that Three Sisters on defense to freeze that. It's going to be like a 20 attack overwhelm unit swinging in. So Major Blazer actually with some very good cautious play here with some foresight and really taking some time to contemplate this decision.
Yeah, the only issue is you're going to lose your Jax, and that's kind of your only win con currently, which is a bit unfortunate. I guess it's a really, really tough decision because you need to figure out a way to survive next turn. I'm looking through the deck list right now. That is the only Three Sisters. So the other option really for Major Blazers to draw that harsh winds.
Let's see what Major Blazer can pull here. It is just a Piltover Castaway. And I didn't quite do the math, but I think this might be enough for lethal. It is a 20 attack Wild Claw swinging in. There's only 3 HP on the blocking side for Major Blazer. And now the lack of 3 Sisters really kicks in, and Ricorex pulling the miracle comeback, it seems.
Yeah, I think that play on the last previous turn with the 3 Sisters, it was so close. I think if Major Blazer held on to it for this, yeah, if you do this, you can't block. So it doesn't work. Unfortunately, putting the weapon on, it just instantly moves it back to the back line.
But there was no play anyway to save Major Blazer. The commitment of the 3 Sisters did ultimately spell Major Blazer's doom, and we are gonna see the Bard deck in action. This is a matchup I'm very curious about, because Ricorex is gonna benefit and be more and more comfortable the longer the game goes because of 3 Revna Lore Keepers in Rico's deck. Major Blazer has definitely access to more punch-through options, but we already see 3 Sisters on Ricorex's side in the opening hand, and it is going to be kept as well alongside 2 Bird the Bellringers.
Yeah, so looking at Rico's list, the Bard, I think, purely is just for access for the Bard the Bellringer and for Esmus, really. For the most part, just getting a couple chimes in. And if you do get the occasional chime, Rico's going to be happy, but I don't think that's what Rico's banking on a lot of the time. I think this was just another way for Rico to play a Battle Fury Overwhelm deck overall, while not basically suffering too much by going into some other cards or regions.
Absolutely agreed. The Pautiporo is also a very uncommon pickup here, but of course does make sense if you do want to play 3 Battle Furies and 3 Revnas. The chimes both hitting the Gnar. Ricorex having the power of the Overwhelmed Gods on his side, and the 5/5 Gnar about to come down next turn is gonna be quite a menace to deal with.
Yeah, the thing is, if one thing that we haven't spoken about is this Bellows Breath. It's a one-off copy. Which will actually remove a lot of Ricorex's board currently.
Yeah, until Lorna does end up buffing the whole deck, this Bellows Breath is actually a nasty card, and it's not a very common tag choice in Jank's Ornn. That's why Ricorex maybe not really having it on the forefront of his mind. Will still have a very effective blocker in the Gnar, but I could definitely imagine Bellows Breath be played very soon. Major Blazer elects to go for the Combat Cook instead here, going for the what's it called, the refill spell mana weapon, let's say, and Ricorex probably might answer here with some juicy Gnar development.
Yeah, but you still have the capability here to attack with the Combat Cook. If you're Major Blazer, Rico most likely is just going to block. Yeah, take 1 unit off the board here from the side of Rico. It's looking very, very tough actually for Rico to claw back here. I think this is actually outside of Gnar. This is a very tough position.
Yeah, you really need that pokey stick to keep that card draw going. I'm wondering, I'm very curious if Major Blazer is going to address this situation. Having the option of a Harsh Winds to get rid of the Gnar and shutting down the pokey stick, so shutting down the card draw, is incredibly valuable here. But it is a hard read for Major Blazer to make, especially after what just happened last game. Maybe Major Blazer will be more cautious and defensive with using freezes in this matchup. So still a lot of ways this game could play out. We'll see whether or not this buffed up Gnar is going to carry Ricorex back into this game.
Yeah, I think that's what Rico's going to put all his eggs in that one basket right there. Sejuani, though, again, is a card that can help remove a unit, just keep that board presence alive. With this attack, this is screaming like we're going to see 3 Sisters come down here from the side of Rico, either to freeze or to buff up.
Double Sky Splitter? Really?
It seems very aggressive into an open 6 mana here from the side of Rico, especially when they're running triple Sky Splitter, triple 3 Sisters.
Yeah, I am not a huge fan of this. Ricorex has so many answers to deal with this, and now can just go for a Fury of the North, can go for a Flash Freeze. Entomb is probably not the pick here. It would remove the weapon, but you really want to generate that Poke Stick. I kind of like Fury of the North and then killing that Combat Cook later with the Poke Stick that will be generated. But we'll see what Ricorex does go for. And we did have the same idea. Oh, right, the Poke Stick's not even needed. Gnar already going up to 8, and that costs Major Blazer a lot. 2 Sky Splitters, 4 mana, as well as the Combat Cook on the board. That was a huge swing of momentum here.
Yeah, Gnar's going to level up here as well. So it's going to grant vulnerable to the favored artisan, which will allow Rico to set up a premier overwhelm turn either with Sejuani or with the combination of the two. Having vulnerable allows Rico to dictate the blocks a little bit better and guarantees some damage going through to the Nexus.
And Gnar is going to grow even bigger. 7-7 is a very formidable stat line here that can hold its own on defense and is, of course, very scary to face on offense. Also, Ricorex just top-decked kind of a nuts card here. Revenant the Lorekeeper is gonna give Ricorex higher odds of winning the longer the game goes. And that last combat, that last turn, that last attack by Ricorex seems to completely have turned the tides of this specific game.
Okay, so I have to correct you there. 7-7 is not a very formidable stat line. 0-7 is. It's a big stat line, but it's not a formidable.
Touche. Nonetheless, I do think this Gnar, especially on turn 6, is still going to have a lot of impact on the trading here. Major Blazer picking up some important cards of their own, picking up a 3 Sisters, more combat options here. And we do see Revenant the Lorekeeper come down on Ricorex's side, immediately putting the work and buffing that Ruthless Raider to a 5-3 stat line. And the Sejuani is still a great option for Ricorex's next attack turn. Also, keep in mind now that after Revna has been played, the value of Poke Stick increases further.
Yeah, I mean, Rico's going to get the additional draw from it, as well as just an additional Nexus damage should Rico want to do it, right? So that's not to be discounted as well, because it does look like Rico's setting up for a big overwhelm turn, either next turn or the attack turn after. Major Blazer has answers there with the Harsh Winds and the Freezes, so can actually stall it out for some time.
And the Bellows Breath is actually hugely impactful and scary here. Major Blazer is threatening to either remove the Gnar or push a lot of Nexus damage. I do think Rico is going to let that Nexus damage slide. The issue for Major Blazer is not that many finishers, right? Not that many Battle Furies and Wild Claws Ferocities, and not that much access to Overwhelms. And therefore Ricorex taking the odds here, going for the Sejuani removal, having both the units on Major Blazer's side marked with a vulnerable tag makes this combat a lot easier.
Yeah, it does. However, you end up this weird scenario on Major Blazer's side. The Harsh Winds isn't really doing much, if that makes sense. It's gonna deny the removal on one of your units, but you're not actually removing a lot of Ricorex's side, depending on the pulls here.
Yeah, it really depends on how Ricorex pulls here. If Gnar tries to pull the Artisan, it is actually very threatening. Then Major Blazer's Harsh Winds could have a huge effect. And that's exactly what Ricorex seems to be doing. And I do expect the Harsh Winds to come through and some major punishment. No, elects to go for the 3 Sisters Flash Freeze instead. But losing the Gnar here kind of hurts. But we also mentioned earlier on, like, Ricorex is in a position where he can take those risks because the Revna has already put the work in and all of the draws on Ricorex's side are just bigger than Major Blazer's draws and board refill.
So this is very close to just straight up lethal from Major Blazer's side. They can forge one of them, their units, and go in and pressure that way, but Sejuani would obviously block and they'd only push 6. It's like really close to ending the game.
Jax comes down, leveled up. This actually puts Ricorex in an awkward situation. I didn't quite math this out, but it's gonna be a significant bunch of damage chopping through here.
It's +3 onto Jax. You can forge one more here. Depending on the blocks, you're probably going to want to put Bard and Sejuani on the overwhelms.
I think if you forge Jax, it's lethal, right? He goes up to 8. if you block him, you still tank 1 damage, and you have to let one of the other ones go through. I think if Major Blazer spots this and forges the Jax, this looks like lethal and goes for the Artisan instead.
Yes, good. He would approve, I think.
I'm surprised by this. You still had time to think. There's no need to rush this. I mean, Major Blazer still goes for some good board removal. I guess the upside here is... Oh, the impact!
Yeah, the impact does
The impact! I completely forgot to calculate that in. This looks like an unstoppable attack after all.
I mean, it could have been 2 over, and then if Rico did have any of their combat spells, so like the Three Sisters or Sky Splitters, they could have survived.
True,
so
true.
maybe it was worth going for that, and putting them down to 1 and playing around like a Sky Splitter.
Wow, Shiny modes come in and Major Blazer goes for the perfectly calculated lethal after all. Being much more aware than I was here in the caster seat. Factoring that impact damage in, spreading out power nicely, and just threatening lethal on the attack. And this comes down to what we mentioned like 2 or 3 turns earlier, where Ricorex decided to not block with the Gnar and therefore took a lot of Nexus damage, which allowed Major Blazer to draw the right cards, but then also to find the lethal line and go for the exact Nexus lethal to close out that series and to kick the #1 ranked seed out of this tournament. Fan favorite Ricorex. Unfortunately, we have to say goodbye to him. And that's it for the championship, the world championship dream.
We Rico, we Rex, we overwhelm, we don't flex.
Oh, such a letdown. But we are ready to jump into another game as we see Ace Bombastico, another very prominent community person, going with an overwhelm list of their own, and it looks like they copied a page out of Ricorex's playbook here, as we see a Darius Freyord list, and we also see a Ruthless Raider with a Bone Club equipped, followed up by a Glacial Saurian, while Dimitri is playing another version of that Gwen Hallowed archetype, and that one is focused around Riven and the Noxus Overwhelm package.
Yeah, it's a deck that came about practically just in the last week, very recently. It's a very sort of it's an overwhelm deck actually. So I'm surprised Rico didn't bring this because there's a lot of overwhelm in this list.
But also Rico wanted to bring 9 Bone Clubs and only 8 Battle Furies. Maybe that was the mistake, you know. Maybe that cost Rico some good karma.
Yeah, but unfortunately, we're seeing here. This is, I think, the Rico Darius list actually from Ace here. So we're just seeing more of it, more Rico. Rico, even though he unfortunately didn't make it through to the next round, he still lives on here with Ace.
Yeah, Rico's spirit carries over. Maybe those two prep together. I don't know. Well, focusing on the action here, Riven does level up. We do see her Blade of the Exile being equipped. Well, not equipped yet, but being in hand. And this is fairly likely to go down on the Gwen. Also having a Might in hand. On this very turn, Dimitri could threaten a ton of damage. The issue is Ace Bombastico does have a Three Sisters in hand and enough mana to cast a Flash Freeze as well.
Yeah, Freeze is probably this deck's biggest enemy. They don't really have much that they can do after the Freeze comes down outside of like Might and Elixirs. Which in general won't be enough to remove a lot of the big units that we're seeing here on Ace's side.
Hallowed does buff the Riven. It is only Hallowed +2, but because of Riven's passive effect, she does get +4 attack instead. The Gwen also getting another +2 and therefore trading favorably into the Ruthless Raider as of right now. And Ace Bombastico now needs to decide, do I remove the Gwen or do I save 8 HP from my Nexus with this Three Sisters Flash Freeze?
So your biggest problem here, by the way, is if you commit the Flash Freeze preemptively on Gwen, you just lose straight up to Might, because Might will double up on Riven too as well. So even if you Flash Freeze Riven could still end up punching for 6.
Yep.
It's a really awkward turn.
Yeah, the last option is to just let this go through, but it's also not the rosiest of options because it's hard to finish your opponent in the next attack turn to just punch 14 damage through. And we do see the Might pre-committed, and this is going to get punished by the Three Sisters on Ace's side.
I love the pass from Ace. Doesn't get allows them to sort of give priority and put Dimitri in that awkward position of, do I commit that might now? And it works out super favorably here for Ace.
Gwen still levels up. Like, Ace going for a slick play here. Arguably forcing a little mistake out of Dimitri, although it's hard to say. But Dimitri is still in a very good position with both champions leveled, with both champions buffed and just super beefy. And Ace just not really having any lethal threat as of right now.
Yeah, I'm just looking through Dimitri's list. So there's the Enraged Fire Splitter as a 2 damage to the Nexus option. There's 3 of them. So that's a play effect card. It's a pretty new card in a lot of decks we've been seeing played recently. Deal 2 to the enemy and 2 to the enemy Nexus, as well as a single copy of Fervor. So going down to 1 was actually extremely scary for Ace there.
Mm-hmm. So this did turn out nicely for Ace so far. The question is, like, Ace needs to put themselves in a position where they can survive another attack, and then they can realistically look for lethal. Like, the only way to find lethal right now is equip Bone Club, pre-commit Might, and somehow hope that Dimitri disconnects and doesn't block. That is not a line we want to go for. Instead, Ace is probably going to try to go a bit wider here with Ruthless Raider and maybe Darius, and rather have some defensive stats on the board.
Yeah, I mean, they can, in theory, use the double Might here and pressure for it. Oh, wait, this is... Okay. That is not what I was expecting from Dimitri. The Hate Spike just removing the Riven. That's going to actually allow Ace to potentially set up a Gwen removal? Or it stops the pressure for lethal, actually.
No, it doesn't, because now the Ruthless Raider hits, Darius levels mid-combat. Now Dimitri actually needs to block off the Gwen.
Ruthless Raider only hits for 2.
Oh, because of the... Yeah, okay. With the block of the... Yeah, good point, actually. I didn't see the Squire being played. And now it is going to be a... What? Okay, I'm confused. I'm lost at this point.
So with Hallowed, how much damage are we pushing here from Dimitri's side? Open attack, Darius is going to have to block Gwen. It's going to be incredibly close, right? You force the block.
Yeah, there's Hello 2, thanks to production for showing us that. So it's going to be a 4-attack Elusive and an 8-attack Gwen, which is going to clear out the Darius, and there's nothing that Ace can do defensively combat trick-wise.
Yeah, however, though, Ace can... I mean, the Glacial Shard, unfortunately, is not going to draw anything, but you can just play and set it up for like a big Might turn.
So Darius does get removed here, and Ace does stay alive on 1 HP, and does have the option to go for something like Saurian into Bone Club into Double Might. Just hope that Dimitri doesn't have Burn, and hope that Dimitri doesn't have another Three Sisters, Sky Split, or any defensive combat tricks, basically.
Yeah, the issue with that is that it's done over multiple actions, whereas you'd really want to set that up, the Glacial Saurian plus Bone Club this turn, which is unfortunate, and set up for an open to play around stuff like the Enraged Fire Splitter. So it's a little bit scary, but it might just be the Saurian plus the Legion Saboteur and then swinging with the open, not developing a Bone Club.
That is also an interesting option. Yeah, spreading mites across 2 attackers is also...
It's more just a mana efficient. They can't play Glacial Saurian Bone Club this turn.
Yeah. Well, what they could do, though, is play Saboteur Bone Club. Open attack, double might. What would that put them at? It would be 1 direct Nexus damage, so 10 to kill, and it would be 13 attack on the Saboteur. Not quite enough, I guess, only forcing the Gwen block. By the way, I'm just now realizing what confused me earlier on was I didn't realize that Gwen actually had the regeneration keyword on her, and that is keeping her healthy throughout all of these trades. And so Dimitri's playlines did actually end up making a lot of sense without really falling into any danger. And we do see the Task Speaker, which cannot be played this game anymore because Ace's Nexus is at 1 HP. Let's see if we're going to see the mistake of a lifetime come out of Ace. I don't think so, but you never know.
So the question is, how much does Ace respect the Enraged Fire Splitter? Because that is the key defining moment. Doesn't respect it, just slams the Bone Club and is just going in. And I think that's correct. I don't think you have a choice if you're Ace. You kind of have to try and finish this off as soon as physically possible.
Exactly, and without the Bone Club, I don't think there was any lethal threat here. Just like if Dimitri goes for the blocks, there's just not enough damage being pushed through. But with the additional 5 damage from Bone Club, it's going to be exact lethal if Dimitri doesn't swap around the blockers here. And they do not. Double Might, I assume it's going to be pushed out onto both units here. It's still a bit of a mind game, thinking about which combo tricks Dimitri could play. They could have something like a Hate Spike, but Double Might on the Saurian is also just going to be enough with the 1 direct Nexus damage coming in from the Saboteur, and therefore Ace does close the game out in a convincing fashion, coming back from impossible odds, but also some... I don't know, the Hate Spike was weird, right? Why did Dimitri go for that? Why did they sacrifice Riven? I couldn't quite follow that whole sequence. Nonetheless, Ace does advance in a very deserving fashion, capitalizing on those opportunities.
Yeah, it's a very, very tough choice, but I do like the double might option there from Ace to finish off the game, playing around that Hate Spike there. If they committed that onto the Legion Saboteur, there was a potential for a Hate Spike to shut that down. I do like the option there.
Very good point. Also, something like Fervor would have done, well, it would have been direct and lethal as well, but just playing around all of the removal options, the players actually being very astutely aware of the threats that the opponents provide, and Ace continuing to move on into the round of 32. And so far, some solid players have prevailed. I'm going to be curious to see how many of the familiar faces we see in the next round and how many of these wild cards of the newer and unknown players we are going to see. And we are ready to jump into the bracket, I believe. No, we are ready to jump into a little break first, and then we're going to have a little look at the bracket to see who is left, who we're going to show next, and who is eventually going to make it and secure the last slots for the World Championship qualifier. See you in a little.